Okay, folks, it's time to catch something that took me a little bit to figure out, and I want to make sure I document the hell out of this. Hyperspark. This is a Hyperspark distributor. This is a Holley HP ECU on here, okay? And yes, you can use this for full sequential, which is great. I've been racking my brain trying to figure out why my timing is so damn far off if I align it with the cap. It's aligned with the cap right now, okay? You can see I got my little notch, and it fits all the way down in there like it's supposed to, okay? Let's note the Hall effect sensor position. Notice, and hopefully you can see it, notice that the tab, see how it's almost out of the sensor? That's what we call a falling edge, okay? Maybe it's better, just maybe you can see it better with the light off. Notice how the tab is about halfway out of the sensor right here, okay? This thing had crazy advance set up like this. And I couldn't figure it out because I aligned it with the cap, and then I started thinking about my controls background, and I started thinking about it. I said, well, what if the HP is rising edge and the sniper is falling edge? That would throw it off, because if you take a look down here, see my little yellow marks down there? Okay. See that? I don't know if it's focusing. Okay, yeah, there we go. See how the one on the right there? That's where the cap lines it up. The mark that's on the left there is where the timing syncs with the crank. Okay? So that means that I have to be, and let me rotate the distributor here. Let me see where I'm at. Let me line it up about where my mark is, my second mark there. Let me back this up here just so you guys can see a little bit more. I put two yellow marks on there so I know where I'm at. Okay, that's more or less lined up. It can actually go a little bit more. Okay, that's almost perfect. Okay, so you see we're lined up down there now. See? Okay. Take a look at this. Now we're about halfway in. Okay, and actually, I know that it's not quite, the timing wasn't quite perfect, but it's with that line, but it's close enough, okay? Let's just double check that again down there. Yeah, that's more or less lined up with my yellow mark. And I know I need to sync it a little bit better than I did, but that's pretty damn close. We're halfway in. That's called rising edge, okay? That's the difference. And this was racking my brain because I went to start this thing and it was cranking like it had so much advance. And I backed the distributor off and it was working. And that's exactly what's wrong. So herein lies the problem. We know that this is a rising edge. We know the snipers are falling edge. We know that we could adjust the distributor, which is pretty far off from the indexing cap. We know that all already. But now the problem is, if I can't index this rotor, right? It's not phasable. This is the stock fixed phasing. You can't change it on a Hyperspark. Look at how far advanced we are already. This is number 1 right here. Okay? Look at how far advanced we are. We should be at 0 degrees, because we're at 0, top dead center number 1 right now. We should actually be retarded to a certain extent, because you're always running advance. So now we're already starting off advanced, which means we're going to be even further out, getting close to the next terminal, and this gap gets really big, and that's not efficient. So I think what I'm going to have to do, because I called Holley and they said don't worry about it, which is horse shit, what I'm going to have to do is modify this to this position, because that's where the indexing cap lines up. So that's going to get me much closer to where I need to be. So I've marked it, and I got to be really careful about modifying this, because I got to not bend this wheel. I've got to drill through this. There's an aluminum plate underneath it. This is just not designed to be modified, but I'm going to take the risk and do it because this is not right. Okay, so here's the modification, and it's not pretty, but it's because they got a hole in the aluminum hub that's underneath it. But I made a hole here and elongated it, and this is phased with the cap. So let's put the rotor on it. Give me a second here. Okay, so we got the adapter on it, and let's grab the cap, and this should be perfectly inside of there, and it is. There's the little index right there. The rotor's indexed here. That fits perfectly, and we're at top dead center. So basically what I've done is I've added a position here for a rising edge where it already had falling edge, and that was wrong. I've went ahead and phased it for rising edge now. So that's where this should be. It should be ahead of this because we're at no advance right now. So as it starts to advance, it's going to get closer to the terminal. So that's why they phase it that way, because at 0 degrees, it's going to be, you want it ahead of the terminal because you're never going to be firing at 0. You're always going to be before top dead center. So that's a flaw on Holley's part, and I made a modification to it, rightfully so. So we got it up and running. Boy, what a battle. I'll just recap what I had to do to make this work right, and a lot of it's, I'm going to blame Holley because it is their fault. But, you know, at the same time, I guess I should defend the fact that there's probably nobody using a Hyperspark distributor on a multi-port setup, because why would you do that when you can use a dual sync distributor, which has 2 sensors in it? Except in our case, with these 200s and 250s, they don't make a dual sync distributor. You have to use the Hyperspark. And Holley really screwed up. The sniper is looking for when that sensor inside of there is going off. The HP is looking for it when it's going on, so that offsets the rotor. And of course, the rotor in a Hyperspark distributor is designed to be idiot-proof, so you can't phase it. You can't move the rotor in relationship to the sensor, which is now off by a tooth. So you have to modify the inside of the distributor. And I think if I didn't cover it already, I'll insert some photos, and you know, there'll be some clips either before or after this, but that's the recap on that. That made it run considerably better. It made it so I can use the phasing cap as long as I've got the rotor aligned in there for the second hole that's in there. Like I said, I'll include that. So that was kind of the big deal with this. Otherwise, I've spent the last week cleaning up wiring, doing looms. You know, since we live streamed, I had a bad coolant temp sensor, the one from Mad Racing Parts. Glenn over there is a good guy. He was nice enough to send me out another one, and he actually wants the old one back for forensics. So that was great. That showed up today. Without that CTS, it made this real hard to run. And that's an 1/8-inch NPT, so he's the only one that's got those. We've got the RC injection injectors on here. I really wasn't happy with the fact that Holley had no idea what injectors they sent me. So I went down to RC, which is in Torrance, not too far from here, and got some RC injection 205cc or 20 pound per hour injectors. That's good quality stuff. Obviously, we made up all the loom there. I had to do some stuff with the map sensor connector. That was none of that stuff lined up like it was supposed to, so I had to crimp some MetroPack connectors onto that. Everything else has just been cleanup. We got the ECU mounted. That was a whole other thing, trying to figure out where that goes. I just finished that today. It's actually mounted under the dash on the bottom side of the cowling steel. So you can't drill into that, so I used some very strong industrial gigantic Velcro to stick it up there. So right, wrong, or indifferent, that's the way that I did it, because there's no other place to put it. So that's done. So the next thing is tune. Aaron and I are going to spend some time on that tonight. We will be getting the thing in tune, as you can hear in this clip of it running. It's out of tune. Obviously, it's surging at idle. That has to do with the AFR table being wrong. I haven't even looked at the AFR table, so I'm sure that the AFR is probably going back and forth as it goes in and out of the vacuum or the map area for the manifold absolute pressure. It's probably switching back and forth between 2 different AFRs. It's probably, there's a lot of work we got to do on the tune. So that's kind of the update on this. Maybe I'll cut this one off here. Just a short update. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that was kind of trick here. Not really. You know, it took a lot of time to go through and do all this looming. I got all my spare I/O, you know, inputs and outputs. They're all right in here. Everything is labeled using a heat shrink label maker. As you probably saw if you watched the live streams of us doing this, I labeled everything. I think we're good. We don't have any leaks that I know of. Everything's lining up like it's supposed to. You know, I can't think of anything that really screwed us too much. That distributor, figuring that out and not having anybody help you. I called Holley, and Holley said, oh, it's fine. Don't worry about the rotor phasing. Well, you get the thing up over 30 degrees of advance, it started missing because instead of the rotor, as it advances, it gets further. This is the number 1 terminal here, right? As it advances, it starts firing the spark further and further back. Well, because it's off by a whole tooth already, at top dead center, the rotor was already over here. Instead of really at top dead center, it should be just past it. So that way, when you get your advance sweep, it's usually on either side of the terminal. Well, we were starting out here, so as it was advancing, it was heading back towards number 4. So, and Holley said that's not a problem. That's what their tech said. So that just shows you how shitty their techs are. So anyways, I fixed it. I made a modification to it, and John called it. You know, John said, hey, this is an issue. He said the rotor phasing was off. I'm the one that kind of figured out the rising versus falling. The two of us figured this out, and I tell you what, it wasn't easy. So anyways, let's wrap this one up. We'll do this. We'll put this one out this week, and we got some tuning to do in the next couple of days to get this thing drivable. I did pull it in and out of the garage. It only stalled twice, so I consider that a win.